Hi, so before we can actually get into the topic itself, I need to address something in advance. The devs have had access to the script of the video that you are about to see since January of this year. A ton of the changes I am going to suggest here have already been made since then. Therefore, the purpose of this video has changed from advocating for changes to serving as an explanation for why the changes had to happen. This doesn't mean that the video itself has changed. 95% of what you're about to see is still the same video that it was initially meant to be. Now, enjoy. If you've closely followed the old generation of Critical Ops' player base, myself included, criticized the game, then the existence of aim assist and how powerful it is surely has been part of that long list of things that require change. But why is that? Firstly, how does aim assist work? For starters, if someone walks through your crosshair, aim assist will drag your crosshair along for a bit. How much that happens is determined by your distance to the target, the movement speed of the target, and obviously how high you set your aim assist in the settings to be. Something that should be considered is that aim assist gives a massive advantage to the CT side because of the way the game works. Counter-terrorists decide the place of contact with their own positioning, and terrorists decide the time of contact with when they peak. In a game without the aim assist, knowing the time of contact gives you a significant advantage because you will definitely have the better reaction time and you can also pre-fire. Together with some server shithousery, we know this as peeker's advantage. In Critical Ops, with aim assist in the picture and being as powerful as it is, an almost aim lock-like assist definitely outweighs the benefits of slightly better reaction time. This is what I would call a reverse peeker's advantage. We get to a point where, even if the entire game was perfect, without maps shifting the balance and without server issues or any other inconsistencies, the game would already be C-decided by default simply because aim assist is there. And all of that for something that does not even really have a reason to be in the game in the first place. So why does aim assist even exist? It was developed to combat the difficulty of aiming on a joystick. You know, on mouse and keyboard you use lots of muscles to aim across a big 2D plane. This is pretty easy to understand even for rather casual players, and there's no real assist needed. On console this is a whole different story. You use only a few muscle groups to aim with a joystick on a 3D semi-sphere. Finding sensitivity that allows you to do both small and precise, but also big motions that preferably should still be fast, is almost impossible, and there's always a huge trade-off where comfort in one will negatively impact the consistency of the other. Using a controller for aiming can also be highly efficient, but it is not as straightforward and intuitive, and more casual and mainly younger players need to have some fun with the game in order to get the motivation to learn how to play the game properly and also to put their parents' money into it. The plan is that there will be a point at which aim assist will progressively make less and less of an impact when players approach the skill cap. On a touchscreen, we sort of have a mix of mouse and joystick. We only use a small set of muscle groups with either our index finger or thumb, but we have a big 2D plane to use for aiming. The reason for why aim assist is required does not exist here, and you don't need much time to get used to aiming on a screen, or at least understanding the concept behind how it works. The main issue with Critical Ops' aim assist though isn't that it exists, but how strong it is. It is so strong in fact that it defeats the purpose of an assist. As I said, it is meant to show players that the game can be fun so that they will feel like investing the time into learning it, just for it to eventually become obsolete as the players become better and better. The major issue in Critical Ops' case is that this point does not exist, but we will get to that. In short, what you need to know for now is the following. For most well-made games, not just on PC but also on mobile, it is expected that players eventually turn off the assists that are offered to them once they reach a certain level of skill, because most of those assists are known and for balancing reasons supposed to hold the player back from getting anywhere near a high level of gameplay. You might rightfully be asking now, but is this balancing act between an assist that is barely doing anything and an assist that is completely overpowered even possible? And as just hinted, the easy response would be yes. In the Formula 1 games, for example, this is the case. This game series' equivalent to aim assist is traction control and an entire page of other driving assists. All of those follow a similar pattern. They are pretty useful in itself, but make it impossible to use certain techniques that form the gap between decent driver and a good driver. As an example, the traction control itself pretty much prevents you from doing things that would lead to you spinning or creating too much under or oversteer. Do you have no idea what that means? Doesn't matter. Just know that you're meant to steer like this and not like this. But actually, In many situations, forcing your car to under or oversteer can be faster than normal smooth steering, and if used right, those rather harsh and quick inputs are also instrumental for combating a spin, for instance. Another, probably easier to understand example would be the difference between automatic and manual shifting. Automatic shifting can obviously keep you focused on all the other aspects of driving and will be hugely beneficial if you don't know the tracks and have no idea when to shift, but it is generally far from hitting the optimal timing on shifts and prevents you from utilizing short shifting, for example, which may help you not to spin into a barrier during rain and which also saves fuel if you use it right. This guy, for example, came to the conclusion that, depending on the track, you may be at least 4 to 5 seconds per lap slower with all assists on. He tested this on one of the shorter tracks in the calendar, so on bigger circuits that difference is obviously going to be even more severe. This means the driving assists follow the perfect guidelines for an assist. They help newer players to find enjoyment in the game, allow for them to learn things step by step by making it possible to be helped in one part of gameplay while being fully on your own in the others, and in the bigger picture, a player using the assists will never be able to touch a player that is not using them. Now, what the f has that to do with critical ops? Well, in other games, things indicated to help newer players will prevent them from going anywhere near their maximum potential. In critical ops, the only way to get anywhere near your maximum potential is to alter your entire playstyle to a degree where you are helping the assist do its job, not the other way around. This obviously negatively impacts the comp scene, which we'll get to in just a second, but aim assist is mainly meant to be useful for casual players, so it surely does not negatively impact the casual scene, right? Little throwback to when I started out playing shooters on mobile. I was exactly the type of player that aim assist is meant to help, and some of the games I played back then also had aim assist. Eventually, this came out and you suddenly were considered shit for using aim assist.
A lot of people would tweet at me and say, "Joker, do you use aim assist?" And I reply like, "Bruh, of course not." But deep inside, like, of course I do. And I want to reply to them, but I don't. And this is all going in my head. And I'm thinking, am I ever going to tell people that I use aim assist?
So, afraid that someone would kill my family if I was to keep using it, I turned it off. This then makes you really shit at the game, but you as a player want to see positive development, not the opposite. This means your mind will trick you into thinking that this learning process required to reach your goal will be worth it. Ever wondered why so many games give you this insanely overpowered character for the tutorial? Well, this is why. So, how does that entire situation look now in COPS? If you started playing the game, you will be pretty good at getting kills as soon as your monkey brain discovers the link between waiting for someone to walk into your aim assist and getting kills. Already being good at something you just started out doing and seeing someone else do even worse than you will trick your mind into thinking that you are like naturally gifted or some shit. We know this as part of the Dunning-Kruger effect, which just about the entire community should be able to identify with. This does not just build toxicity and false expectations, but it also prevents you from ever getting into the situation of being bad and starting at the bottom of that healthy learning curve. And in case you question if there is always someone playing worse than you, consider that there have been awful players in the game in 2016 when the game was subjectively a lot harder to play compared to now, but there are still awful players now despite the overpowered aim assist, highly simplified mechanics and a map design so suggestive of what is the sensible thing to do that you would almost need to be part of a different species to not understand how to hold a bomb site. Speaking of awful players, little interesting tidbit. When I first properly got into the game, a friend of mine was kinda chilling with this dude sometimes, and he kinda liked me for some reason, which then got me on the server where all your Germans were chilling, and playing inners and stuff. All your Angels, Exos, Cheesemans, and literally everyone else that was somewhat known in the German and European comp scene. And I was getting destroyed there, right? I had just gotten an iPad and I was off. You only know the current me and you would assume that this is where the trend of me complaining about everything started, but you would be mistaken. I was bottom fragging every inner and every ranked, and I was always getting picked last. And this may seem weird, but this was demoralizing and motivating at the same time, because all of the stuff that I now can blame things on just didn't exist back then, and every single death just showed me how much I still have to learn. And this is what new players should experience. The moment of deciding between either quitting or getting good serving as a kind of natural selection. This doesn't happen anymore. What you will experience now is that no matter how bad you are as a player, you will get a few kills here and there and you will be able to blame the rest on literally anything that comes to mind. I mean, I understand the game and rarely misunderstand in-game stuff, and I find enough excuses for literally anything. People who think that FPS increased weapon damage or some shit will fucking drown in excuses to choose from, and you can't even blame them. The line between your own misplays and instances where the game breaks or some other shit that is fully out of your control gets you killed is blurred so much that even if you know what you're doing, you will often not understand how to improve on some things. If this is the norm, how are new players meant to get good by healthy learning? They won't be able to, and so the only way in which they can improve will be to take shortcuts, but we will get to that. The way in which Critical Force and generally everyone who makes aim assist a part of their game expects the curve to go is that the new player uses aim assist until he sees the need to improve beyond it, at which point he will turn it off. Following this logic, the impact of aim assist on the combined scene, especially in the top-heavy subcategories of ranked and competitive, will be minimal. This is how it goes with the previously mentioned F1 assists. Let me ask you a question though. If a player does just fine with using aim assist and never gets to experience the weaknesses of aim assist, how should he ever feel the need to improve beyond it and turn it off? In other words, if the aim assist is strong enough to give you decent performance on its own, why turn it off then? Why not stick to a consistent script playing for you instead of relying on your own skill that you need to spend time to develop first? But we will get to that. But now let's get a bit more technical. We have kind of pointed out how aim assist hurts the development of casual players and prevents them from ever becoming more than, well, casual players, but let's just prove it real quick. As previously mentioned, the issue with aim assist is not that it exists, but how powerful it is and how it puts everyone on a similar level in terms of aiming skill. The issue with that is that we get into a very special position in terms of gameplay. Currently, nothing that is going wrong with the gameplay is on its own causing any problems. Sure, reworking running accuracy, adding a cooldown to it, or making the recoil patterns harder will do something, but none of those things is exclusively responsible for anything. The issue is that the entire gameplay of Critical Ops, from the gun damage to the recoil and pretty much everything else, is somewhat similar to how the game was when it first came out. If anything, weapons are more accurate and dealing more damage now. Back then, the game was intended to be a PC game in Facebook Game Room. On PC, the game obviously did not feature aim assist, and the only reason why it was ever added was for Nvidia Shield and mobile players to be able to compete with PC aim in cross-platform lobbies. Once the PC version was discontinued, there was no need for aim assist to be a part of the game anymore. This means the entire game is made to be well balanced on the average PC accuracy, which is around 20%. This site puts the average accuracy between their 170,000 site members on 21%, for example. Exceptional players on PC can get to something like 38%, like Robs for example. This means exceptional players can almost double the average by simply investing more time into developing their own mechanical and mental skill. As we have seen in my first video on aim assist, even bad players in Critical Ops can easily top these 20% and get closer to Robs than they can get to the average. I shouldn't have to explain to you that this is a massive issue. As previously mentioned, the difficulty of being good at a shooter game is not to do, for example, flicking, spray control and crosshair placement on its own, but to do all of them together. Without aim assist, someone walking around this corner would force me to react, trace the guy with my thumb, maybe crouch with my left index, if so, adjust to the height difference from crouching, spray control, and while doing all of that, predict the guy's movement. Is he going to stop moving? Will he crouch? And depending on what I see, I need to react differently. Do I need to flick down to compensate for him crouching? Do I need to stop tracing to a side and instead center and focus on my spray control? With aim assist in place, all I need to do is to stop moving and hold my shoot button down. This is far less complex, and despite making the game boring for them, is probably amazing for casual players, but this should not be all you need to do to play a game at a high level. But what all of this also does is to force you to play in one strict pattern. No matter where you are, aim at the corner and you're golden. If you feel the urge to aim yourself while aim assist is there, you're in big trouble. It is a system that has been unchanged for years. How is it gonna react? Imagine someone is walking across your screen and you're tracing him with your crosshair. At what point will aim assist start or stop engaging? Will it not do anything and force you to aim yourself for once? Or best of all, will it do something at the beginning and then just randomly refuse halfway through the gunfight? All of that are questions that don't have an existing answer, and that shifts the blame for a bad play in game away from the player, where said player could practice and improve on it, but it shifts it towards the game itself that none of the players can directly influence, and that won't always screw you, but definitely a few times a day. What if you play perfectly for one of the two scenarios, but the second one happens? What if you get the one result that screws you 10 times a game, while a worse player only gets screwed twice and wins based on that? How does matchmaking and ranked compensate for that? Can it even compensate for that? All questions we would not need to ask if aim assist only was a thing in the sub-community of the game that it is made for. But is it even a good tool to support these starting players? I would personally disagree, because one of the major flaws it has is that it forces players to play after one certain schematic, which is not even the best or most consistent way of playing, it's just the one that works best with aim assist. So instead of holding their hand, aim assist in COPS prevents players from learning and actually encourages them to build false habits, especially considering that the game itself features situations where there is no aim assist. I think it is pretty weird to have even the best players of your game turn to complete bots as soon as there's a smoke grenade near them. The entire way in which aim assist forces you to play for looks and not for results. Without aim assist, the most important thing is to be accurate. The speed at which you flick is only secondary to you actually hitting the shot. With aim assist, a fast flick somewhere in the ballpark of your target will lead to aim assist probably catching you and pretty much doing everything else. Many other techniques that are instrumental for good aim in other games are fully replaced by aim assist, which takes away a lot of the aspects that normally make up a good aimer. This in turn simplifies a game with already little to learn even more, which increases the impact that smaller inconsistencies and minor advantages by a device or frame rate actually end up having on someone's success. Hi, this is Editing PHiNiX, currently very much enjoying his job. Yeah, I did not really know what to put here as a visual, because it would be really convenient to have data to back up what I just said, so I made you something. I wanted a control group that both you can double check and that I can cherry pick from, and Royal Network has this interview channel you may know, and I simply searched device in there, so I literally don't even know half of those people, but this is the outcome. I don't think that anyone here is surprised now, so yeah, moving on. Critical Ops is a skill-based competitive game after all, right? So aim assist surely can't make competitive go to shit too, can it? So before actually explaining anything further, another little story time, because I'm certain that this question will come up. Aim assist has been fine for so long and nobody has complained about it until relatively recently, so there can't be anything wrong with it, and it's just people trying to find excuses. So aside from the fact that there have been outcries from the competitive community since 2017 begging the old devs to nerf aim assist, this is exactly what old devs responded with. The old competitive scene in 2016-2017 consisted of two groups of players. Group 1, people who played Critical Force's former game or any other mobile game at a high level and were somewhat involved with how the genre worked and just got into Critical Ops because it was the hot shit back then. And Group 2, people who initially wanted to play CSGO but couldn't because their PC was shit, and who later transitioned to mobile gaming out of the love for Critical Ops once the COPS PC version was discontinued. So both of these groups likely somewhat knew their way around CSGO, and so it was a no-brainer to be influenced by CSGO's playstyle. CSGO obviously does not feature aim assist, and therefore the playstyle also does not revolve around it. Later towards 2017, early 2018, aim assist was now commonly accepted, but people stuck to their style of play, and new players usually were influenced by the people already at the top, their playstyle and the content they created, so aim assist still wasn't really an issue. Back to 2016, playing in a budget CSGO type way worked pretty well, and so the first comp teams, some of the most dominant ones in the game's history, formed. This then kind of got bigger and bigger until a few updates around late 2017 marked the first huge crisis in terms of the comp scene being actually pretty pissed at some of the creative decisions from the old dev team. This then kept getting worse and worse until eventually PUBG Mobile was released, and a big chunk of the NA, and most notably the EU scene, quit Critical Ops in an instant because they grew tired of putting time into a game that was not paying them back, neither financially or in terms of enjoyment, and the people behind it not even listening to their advice didn't make things better either. This meant that the iconic teams who did not want to disband right away needed new players. Previously, it was the norm that most of the biggest content creators were also the best players because people wanted to watch them play and get some inspiration for their own gameplay out of it. Those big creators then left or got really inactive, and so a lot of knowledge that previously would have been passed on to the newer generation just got lost. This newer generation was now wanted and needed by many teams, and many players who weren't ready yet were forced to perform on the highest possible level, and they were getting destroyed at first, so they were forced to improve quick. They didn't have the time to spend a few hundreds of hours or a few thousand of hours on searching smoke lineups or getting better game sense. They needed major improvement right away, and so they explored some of the things that nobody really had looked into before. After some really weird shit happening in scrims at the time, eventually they started looking into aim assist, and suddenly they were destroying most of the old players. But why did this happen? Well, I mentioned before that aim assist is CT-sided. This works in a way where as long as you can predict and therefore pre-aim an enemy, you both will be having aim assist. If that enemy uses an unexpected angle, no matter if out of stupidity or intentional, they will still be having aim assist as soon as you peek, but you won't have aim assist on them because you need to flick onto them first. Back then, this issue did not exist because everyone capable of playing at a high level was sort of used to the same playstyle. Not meaning everyone was forced to play in the same way, but saying that everyone had an understanding of what angles were the most sensible to use based on risk versus reward. This is how people play in CSGO, and top-level COPS players try to emulate this as well as that is possible with the resources the game gives you. Everyone coming up looked at the guys already at the top and also adapted a similar playstyle. Eventually, when the old guys left, the dudes that needed to step up played in a whole different style, and because content evolved from time-consuming good content to mindless clip hunting, there was no way for newer players to learn this old style of play. This meant old players played one way, new players played another, new players slowly got to understand the old style of play and learned to predict it, but wouldn't use it themselves because they knew that it would make them worse. Old players could not adapt because the newer style of play lacks any conventional patterns that, as a comm player, you teach yourself to look out for in order to predict them better. Old comm players then slowly got more and more pissed at losing to players who were nowhere near as good as them on paper.
Jay and Kendrick not get it, and I felt like one of them should have got it. I felt like Joyner Lucas should have won a Grammy. Every year we went, it was, I would be up for album of the year, and then the winner is Norah Jones. Who? I'm fine if I lose to fucking Kanye or someone that I'm like, okay, I respect that. I know who that is, and Kanye has a huge following and he's made a massive impact on music. Fine, I'm good with that.
Old comm players then slowly got more and more pissed at losing to players who were nowhere near as good as them on paper, so they asked the devs about fixing aim assist for one last time. The devs back then did not give much of a shit, and so only a handful of old players remained. But I can see an argument coming from you right now. Well, maybe these players were simply not good enough to play a game at a high level and did not have the dedication to adjust to minor changes in meta or gameplay. This is wrong, and for the longest time I was looking for a way to prove it. And I thought, well, I can't just talk about myself here. So I made you a list of former and current COPS comm players and what they did after they left or while they took breaks from COPS. These are the ones from the top of my head and mostly from you because that is the scene that I'm most involved with. So just to quickly summarize this point again. These players saw change in a game they were already really fucking good at, and instead of adapting to this seemingly minor change in gameplay, they threw everything away and played a new game instead. The changes in gameplay in COPS at the time literally made COPS a new and arguably worse game, and for a ton of players it just lost the appeal that it previously had. Oh, and another thing I find really funny, pretty much all of these guys were iPad players in COPS. Basically, all of these people therefore preferred to play a game they barely knew on a phone versus continuing to play Critical Ops, a game they were already pretty good at, on their iPads. And take from someone that is currently struggling to switch from a 9.7-inch iPad to a 13-inch iPad, this is a ton of pain to go through, and basically anyone I know would avoid switching devices at all costs. And this is where we are now, story time over. Now, how exactly does aim assist hurt the comm scene on a technical level? Well, so firstly, the exact same thing that is the case for casual players is now also the case for the comm scene. People build an ego over nothing, get unnecessarily toxic, and never see the need to improve, but it goes a lot deeper for comp. Given the history of how aim assist was used, you can probably tell how much the skill-based aspect of the game has suffered. Back then, people on different devices than iPad Pros would perform on the highest possible level, and the 60fps iPads were the norm, not the exception. Aim assist is involved in that development because thanks to aim assist, the skill level that you have on entry is already pretty high. I mean, if you split up aiming into its four most basic parts, then aim assist has fully replaced two of them, made one significantly easier and more consistent, and the fourth can pretty much be disregarded because of how little impact it has in COPS. Fun fact, those four things are also what makes up aiming in CSGO and all other PC games. What makes them perfect is that it is not too difficult to become good at all of them separated, but what makes the difference between good players and the best of the best is the ability to do all of them at the same time, especially when playing in front of a huge crowd or for a potentially life-changing amount of money. Let's draw a little circle here and split it up into four equal parts. All of those make up aiming: flicking, tracking, crosshair placement, and spray control. Now, the good thing about that is, if you're less good at one of those, being particularly good at any of the others can compensate for that if you adjust your playstyle accordingly. This is also why it is a shit idea to force the same playstyle upon your entire community. There are obviously some other aspects to it, and I would make that look like this. We have everything that you can learn within the game, and in any good game that probably gets you like 90% of the way there. Everything beyond that is just the really situational stuff, from our beloved timing to all of the random inconsistencies all games have. Now, imagine a game gives less resources to the player, maybe maps are really simple or there's an aim assist, that will obviously take something away from your 90%. These are then filled in by stuff that we actually don't really want having a major impact. That is issue number 1. Issue number 2 is how much of this stuff you need in order to be at what level in the community. In a good game, you're probably going to need your full 90% in order to make it in competitive. Then maybe 80% to play at a high level in ranked, and going down from there step by step. But what if, right, aiming goes away because there's an aim assist? Maps are simpler, so a bit of the map awareness and positioning goes away. We might be down to 85 or 80% just like that. The question is, what does now separate the players that previously were at the full 90% and are now at 80 because the game got easier, with the people that always were on 80? And you see the list of things that we have on the side here. Ask yourself, what of these have you ever significantly used while playing COPS ranked? Used to a point where you said, oh my god, I just won this game because of skill XYZ. For me personally, very few things. So let's go for a better, more conservative estimate. We have 30% of the most rudimentary and fundamental gameplay rules left. Everything else has been replaced by simple noob-friendly mechanics, partially luck-based elements sprinkled into skill-based aspects of gameplay, or players being given training wheels. What does now separate the guys who had 90, 80, 70, 60% from the guys that always were on 30? And I'm not kidding, let's just say that again in a slightly less broad way. If aim assist gets you like 80 or 90% of the way to a good aimer, that vastly increases the amount of people that qualify as a good aimer. Aiming still being the most important skill to have in a shooter, at least outside of competitive. Meaning, a player that can be good at aiming can now be shit at everything else and still be good at aiming. This means more and more players who are good at aiming but shit at everything else will rank up higher and higher to a point where you can take nothing for granted in the game sense department anymore. In a CSGO type environment, angles are evaluated based on risk versus reward. In that case, consistency is key. So, an angle where you can get a guaranteed kill once every 1.5 rounds is definitely superior and more likely to be frequented by someone who is good at the game over an angle that gives you 4 kills like once a game at best. Based on this simple rule, the IGLs of teams craft protocols that are basically a long flow chart that gets more and more complex the longer the round goes on. Inside those protocols, you obviously also evaluate what angles are more likely to be used by the players of the enemy team specifically. Based on that, you adjust your existing strats and where smokes go, where pop flashes go, in what order and by who certain angles are cleared, and so on and so forth. If one of the enemies is simply an idiot and permanently does things that make no sense, hundreds or thousands of hours of premeditation have a close to non-existent chance of working. I may explain this deeper on another occasion, but please don't confuse stupidity with skillfully playing unexpected. What we are speaking of here is stupidity, which is common and acceptable if you are new to a game and have no idea what the fuck you're doing. But you clearly don't belong into any sort of ranked game in that condition. But in COPS you will certainly be there because the game keeps telling you that you are doing good and that you are the best because it keeps giving you a fuck ton of free kills, aka dopamine. GameSense stops working if literally everything but GameSense is every player's God-given right by default, which mixes logically thinking individuals with people who shove their phone into the microwave to make it charge faster. This means the fact that aim assist is as strong as it is has just made the two biggest aspects of competitive shooters completely trivial. Whether you are good at aiming or not does not matter as much anymore because you have this divine creature known as aim assist carrying you, and because of that, GameSense stops working as well. This is bad because all of that makes it statistically less worth it to put time and effort into learning these things. Long story short, at the current point of COPS' meta, there is nothing in the game that would be worth putting time and effort in like it was the case back then, because the advantage gained by them can either easily be countered by stupidity, is highly inconsistent, or the difference they make is in no way worth the time that it would require to do those things. This in turn boosts all the inconsistencies in the game to a highly impacting level. If you don't understand why that is, let me just give you a short example. Bugs exist in CSGO. Obviously. So if they happen in like a Gold Nova match, they will have a relatively small overall impact because if one of the two teams deserves to be higher than Gold Nova by a significant margin, then this team will be able to win against the other even if it was to lose like 1 or 2 rounds to a bug. This is because there is so much you can improve on, both mentally and mechanically, when you are in Gold Nova. This means big difference in skill, little impact of bugs. In other words, the further you are away from the skill ceiling of the game, the less likely you are to lose just based on something out of your control. In turn, if a bug impacts a match in a tournament game, then this can have a major impact on the game. Given the right, or in this case rather wrong circumstances, this can change the winner of a map, the game, or even the whole tournament. So small difference in skill equals big impact of bugs. In other words, the closer you are to the skill ceiling of the game, the more likely you are to lose just based on something out of your control. Now, replace the word bugs with any inconsistency or unwanted impact that you can think of. Now guess what? The feature intended to make the game better for casuals not only makes it worse for casuals, but makes it unplayable for a comp seed as well, because it artificially lowers the maximum skill level and makes it easier for everyone to get near it. This in turn makes things such as all the just mentioned inconsistencies become an issue for competitive, ranked, and the game in general, while the reason for their involvement, being aim assist, is giving no benefits to the game in any way, shape or form. And in case you were about to say, but there's a big difference in skill in Critical Ops, let me compare that real quick. COps does not have anything separating Spec Ops to Elite Ops ranked with high level competitive gameplay. I think we can mostly agree on that. The game is largely based on aim, and all of the people that play on these levels are somewhat equal in that department, mainly because of aim assist, I would say. Let's compare that to CSGO, where things go a lot deeper than raw aiming. Global Elite, the highest matchmaking rank, is galaxies better than people on a low matchmaking rank. Same as in COPS, you would say. But Global is only somewhat equivalent to Faceit 4 or 5. So Faceit level 10 is significantly better than Faceit level 4 or 5, and therefore significantly better than Global Elite. Beyond Faceit 10, you get towards organized semi-pro and pro teams. Literally every semi-pro team would destroy any random 5-stack of Faceit players, simply because a team that is thrown together for one match may be able to equal an organized team in mechanical skill, but they lack the synergy and strats to consistently give themselves the opportunity to shine with said mechanical skill. People who play on a semi-pro level in CS usually do that on the side, and then you have another step. People who are pro players and practically contracted to an org and having CSGO as their main occupation and source of income. I probably don't need to explain to you that someone who gets up, plays CSGO for 15 hours to then go back to sleep will be able to practice more efficiently and play better than someone who gets home from his 9-to-5 job or school to play some CSGO with his mates. And from that lower pro level, there are galaxies to the 24 teams that get invited to Pro League, Blast Pro, Majors and so on. And even those pro teams regularly get destroyed by the best of the best. So between a player like Simple or Zaibu and your average global elite dude, it's not just galaxies, it's a fucking super cluster in between. Meanwhile in COPS I would say a top level player like Noxic may be like 5 to 10% better than most Elite Ops players. This is significant within the realm of COPS, but a joke compared to any other competitive game. Something I wanted to mention here is that you can see Critical Ops' skill ceiling right here, but CSGO's is nowhere to be seen. That is because it does not properly exist. The limiting factor in CS is not the game itself, it's the time that a player will have before they get too old to compete. And if you were to say, but there is no way it can take someone that long to get good at a game. In COPS and most other mobile games, no, but elsewhere that is certainly a possibility. And that is because nobody innovates in COPS. Everyone just kinda has been doing the same thing over and over again. And yes, I will certainly simplify what is about to come up by a lot. CSGO started off with Source and 1.6 players being on top because the games were quite similar, which gave them quite the head start. Very early on, people saw NIP win 87 LAN maps in a row and thought, well, they're the best, there's no way to really beat that. Then people figured, yo, the AWP is kinda nuts in this game. 2014, JW started carrying Fnatic to new heights, and a certain Kenny S slowly turned into French CS's new star. Then 2015, AWP got nerfed to Oblivion, which didn't seem to do that much at first. Then 2016, kinda all went to Brazil for some reason. 2017 was a bit of everything until NA somehow won a major. Then in early 2018, Astralis popped up and just felt like revolutionizing how nades were used in this game. Then the Astralis dominance happened until the pandemic started. No, seriously, look at this, what the fuck? Astralis went into the pandemic break undisputed. Then first Zipnex went on a break, which sent the whole team into a bit of a spiral. Then Device left, 50% for Nip and 50% for Burnout. And During the pandemic, Na'Vi turned God mode, Vitality found out that ZywOo is a god, and that brings us to present day with a 50-50 Vitality and Ex Astralis roster, old reliable Na'Vi with a few roster changes due to a fucking war that happened since I last uploaded a proper video, an international super team, a team of 2 cousins, a prodigy, and a bunch of roster changes. That's kind of the state of CSGO right now. So, what I was saying was, we went from an era of ultimate team play to an era of ultimate AWP carries to an era of ultimate utility usage to an era of pretty much a mix of all of the above. Are we at a destination? No idea, probably not, because every time we thought so before we weren't. But unfortunately, in COPS nobody even desires to innovate or try to get closer to the destination to begin with. Everyone just kinda does the same boring shit from 4 years ago and nobody cares about anything but individual skill, which, as we've just mentioned, is kinda silly. Meanwhile in CSGO, the closer we get to ZywOo, the less important is individual skill. Everyone on that level or anywhere near it is a fucking beast at aiming and everything else that is somewhat tied to mechanical skill. What is important is the consistency at which you can perform at that level. And this consistency is determined by how well your team is able to give you the chance to shine with said skill. In Critical Ops, you can skip this whole process of team play by sitting in a corner and waiting for players to walk into your crosshair, just that this is not showing how skilled you are, but how well you can abuse the assist given to you with the premise of getting to know the game. Sure, a very well coordinated team can beat that, but we don't have that in COPS. Sure, current teams practice too, but with like 5 roster changes a month, you're not getting to this level. It is simply not possible. So instead of talking about how well our team can pop flash us into a peak, this whole community jerks off over who is the best at having other people walk into their crosshair, and people get an ego over this shit. Oh, and having just compared the skill levels of different ranks in CSGO, let's get back to COPS. Here I'm confident to say, Elite Ops and Bronze players have 2 things that separate them: speed and consistency. And if you paid attention earlier, you see 2 issues with that. Anything that is somewhat tied to speed is in some way, shape or form tied to reaction time, and alongside that to frame rate, which in COPS, due to the lack of skill-based elements in the meta, can hardly be compensated for. And in terms of consistency, do you know what is also pretty damn consistent? A fucking line of code that plays for you. Also, more frame rate and a better device in general will make your user input more accurate and therefore make you more consistent as well. This means there is a skill ceiling. It is pretty low because the meta lacks skill-based elements and generally the game hands a lot to players for free. Every player will hit this skill ceiling within the first few months of playing in the game. The only way to exceed this level by a few percent is to buy a better device and therefore give yourself the tools to increase your speed and consistency to slightly above average.
Ooh, that's kind of small.
So, just like basically the entire rest of this video, I wrote what you're about to hear in January or something. So, please just focus on the screen as there will be a lot going on there now. I will be noting which of the things I'm mentioning here have already been addressed, as well as how and in what update. Also, thank you so much for listening to this for like 40 minutes now, so thank you. Back to it. And because we all want COPS to improve again, let's get to the final bit of the video. How could you fix all of the shit just mentioned? Firstly, no casual player will currently be able to make the jump too competitive by healthy learning. This means once the current generation of comp players leaves the game, the comp scene will be dead indefinitely unless the following or comparable changes are made by the time this happens. Another wave of leaving comp players is pretty likely to happen soon given the releases of Apex Legends and Valorant on mobile being just around the corner and the ever increasing popularity and alongside that price pools of other mobile shooters. Best would be to set the new maximum aim assist to be equivalent to what currently is anything between 10 and 20%, or probably even better, rework the whole system. This weakened or reworked aim assist would not allow for people to abuse it the way they currently can, but mainly it will encourage and somewhat force casual players to learn every other aspect of the game alongside aiming itself. Aim assist in Critical Ops does not have the status of an assist, but instead of a replacement for aiming in a majority of possible gameplay situations. Alongside those things, a few other adjustments should be made. Running and jumping accuracy should be lowered, and the general movement speed with guns should also be lowered by a few percent. In the same breath, the time-based movement penalty, serving as a simplified and on mobile mechanically possible equivalent to CSGO's counter-strafing, should be reintroduced on assault rifles at least. A positive side effect of having less aim assist in high ranks and competitive would be that the entire hacking issue on a pro level would be a lot easier to clear up. See, if a game is fully skill-based, then it will be close to impossible to hide a performance deficit in one aspect of the game by cheating without making it obvious by underperforming in all others. Simplified, if someone plays on an exceptional level in one department but can't perform anywhere near that same level in any of the others, then there's definitely something weird about that guy. This is pretty much it. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, you may want to, like the video and maybe leave a sub if you would like to see more. I hope you enjoyed. See ya.